Of course, you have clients who you know are morally not on the right, many times legally not on the right. But let me tell you that your professional duty demands you to represent them. And your challenge, your ethical challenge is not in representing somebody who is morally tainted, it's in how you conduct the litigation. Now, when Ajmal Kasab was represented in court, people went after those lawyers saying, how dare you? But if Ajmal Kasab was shot and taken to hospital, nobody questioned the surgeon for treating him. Of course, there's a difference because the lawyer's representation is to do with the conduct of the person, whereas a medical professional's is not. But in a sense, the oath we take is no different from that. So my ethical challenges are never representing people who don't look good to society. My ethical challenges are, am I conflicted in any way? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I withholding documents from court? Am I making a false submission in court? Am I colluding with my opponent? In some cases, is my client trying to fix a case? Those are the ethical problems, and those are the ones you have to steer clear of. I'll tell you frankly, you do those cases not very happily. There's no joy in these cases. There are sharp cases where people you represent, you know, are rank offenders. You will do your job within the parameters of the law. Even a child rapist, in your opinion, who is the scum of society, may require a hearing at many levels. The rapist himself may be a child. It's only a lawyer who's going to then bring him within the Juvenile Justice Act. That rapist may be a one-time offender. How does that matter? Morally it doesn't matter. Legally it does. A one-time offender need not be hanged to death. There is a debate on the capital punishment. There are cases where police fix cases against accused, and that's really where we come in. But I can't say these sharp cases are the ones where you feel happy doing your job. It's a game of sort of snakes and ladders in the profession, and a lot of people get the ladders the wrong way. For example, lawyers are not supposed to solicit clients, right? And it's a very difficult condition. When you're young at the profession, you wouldn't mind soliciting a little bit of work. But if my code of conduct tells me I should not, I should not. And then I'm appalled to find that my friends next door are running websites and making presentations and doing cocktail parties to land big work. And a lot of them got ahead of me in the race. There's no doubt. They got really good work quickly. I hated it. But I've also realized that ultimately, and I told you that the real judge of your standing in the profession is what the bar thinks of you. Meaning, not the cocktail bar, but the professional bar. And that bar is an unforgiving place. And they know very, very instinctively who has got ahead by shortcuts, who is a bit of a fixer, who plays to the gallery, and who are the ones who've stuck it out. And I realized that real societal standing that you mentioned comes in the latter. No matter how much of a wheeler dealer you are, in the system, with the judges, with your colleagues, with discerning students, etc., that filtration takes place, and that's the real thing. So how do you do it? You pay a price, you reflect on it, but ultimately, what is your grain? Right? Are you even comfortable doing these things? I go back. I want to be the chap I was in Mr. Vincent's class. It felt right. I don't want to be the chap I was in Mrs. Sally's class. So it's a very personal thing also, but let me tell you, a lot of this is also to do with exemplars in the profession. You need to be able to see these examples above you, around you. And then when you look at the case studies, let me tell you, friends, I don't mean to be defensive of the legal system, but I think that somewhere the media has run away with it. And it's only the times when the man bites the dog that you read about the law. But there's a lot going for it. You look at the lives of judges. Many of these people are people who've come up through the grassroots. They've studied, these are those classic Abdul Kalam type stories, studied under street lights and so on, but they're there. And there are people who are now deciding for you and me. So I would only say that you try and look for inspiration from the right types of examples and follow suit. Yeah. I think the first is that there are so many glass ceilings, real and perceived, There are a lot of people don't want to go that way. Like it's too hard to do. But as I've always said, the glass ceilings are there anyway. This is one more. I don't mean to reduce it, but it is one more glass ceiling in a set of glass ceilings that already exist. And you can do it. The other, I think, is the patriarchy of the system. This I'm not saying. If you hear what Justice Indu Malhotra had to say recently, she has recently been appointed to the Supreme Court directly from the bar. She openly said, I never got to do corporate litigation. Right? The big ticket litigation where the money is corporate litigation. She said, no, clients thought women can't do this. So she was doing a sort of a B grade of work for a long time till she earned her stripes, which in real terms means she probably took 10 years longer than everyone else. That's terribly unfair because it's ultimately a competence thing. She's even said on the bench sometimes she experiences it, where fellow judges may say, oh, ye aapko samajh mein nahi aayega. Kyun nahi samajh mein aayega? You're on the Supreme Court, for God's sake. We're not talking about arm wrestling or something here. Any judge on the Supreme Court should be deemed to be equally aware of the nuances of the law. And how does that impact the honesty syndrome? I think that is a new point for me. I feel the bar and the bench would be a better place with more, well, what do I say, female virtue. I have worked with women at the bar. Many of my juniors have been girls. They are now successful practitioners. And I have found a different value system in them, for the better. I see that even on the bench with some judges, I can't say all, but with some judges, that the life experience is different, the sensitivity is different. And you see this especially in cases involving offenses against women, against children. The sensitivity to deal with the victim is quite different. I have seen male judges being absolute brutes in court in some cases, where lawyers have been permitted to cross-examine witnesses on things like their reputation and whether they are promiscuous and so on, which is completely extraneous to a case. And I think all of that moral virtue, that honesty can only improve if we have more women in the system. But isn't that exactly what the legal profession is supposed to do? Homosexuality was taboo. Women couldn't go to Sabrimala. These were socially accepted vices, if you will. A menstruating woman was supposed to be stigma in society. A gay person was supposed to be stigma in society. But who questioned it? Sati was legitimate, right? In certain places, stoning to death is legitimate. Amputation is legitimate. Chemical castration is legitimate. That's a societal practice. It's a legally blessed societal practice. But we, I think, as a profession, many lawyers have been socially sensitive enough to question this. And luckily we have a constitution that enables you. It's a rights-based constitution. And you have courts that are expected to not just enforce those rights, but reimagine them. And the Indian Supreme Court may not have always done it. The high courts may not always have done it. But you will see that if there's any reason our rights discourse has expanded itself to where it is today, it's also because of the courts. And court judgments are only as good as the legal assistance that judges get. Right? Of course, the end product is the judgment. But what that does reflect is the imagination and the faith and the hard work of the legal professionals. And I think lawyers, by and large, are the ones who are perpetually questioning these status quos. And they ought to therefore be the drivers of change. Of course, the white lies are excused, but parents have to be very conscious, I think. I'm not a parent, so I'll be a bit of a hypocrite answering this. But I think parents have to be conscious of the value systems they're passing on. And I'm talking about things like money, right? How much do you value money? Do you look at how entitled you are? We were having this chat, Lokesh and I, the other day. When you go to a wedding, how much food do you waste? Does that food not mean something to somebody else? Do you pay bribes? Do you flaunt your wealth or do you share it? And a lot of these virtues, of course, people pick up on their own, but I think a lot of it does permeate from the top. And that's probably where you need to be worried, not about the Khana Khalo types. Your other question was on shortcuts. Look, I want to make one thing clear. If there were legitimate shortcuts, we would have all taken them. Nobody is a sucker. Nobody wants to slog it out more than they need to. But there is a reasonable amount of pain and bloodshed that will go into being who you are. And that's what I tell young lawyers. I say, if there were shortcuts, I would have taken them. I'm not stupid. But if you need to struggle for a few years to earn your stripes, not make money, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Now, beyond that, if your code of conduct doesn't prevent you from doing something, what you're doing doesn't make you feel dishonest or is not morally wrong, I don't see why you should not do it. See, I'm not sure how much legal advice can drive policy change directly, because that presupposes that governments are willing to take legal advice and act on them, which is not always the case. It may happen, it may not happen, depending on what the motivations of the governments and the power centers are. But where that change can come is when it's court-driven. So even something as simple as the lakes example you gave, and I was in fact representing the Karnataka government in the NGT when the Bellandur case was on. It was probably one of the hardest cases I had done because I had really nothing to say in their defense. Basically, all of Bangalore's sewage flows into Bellandur and you're then asked to defend that position. But the fact is, just the pressure of court, the social awareness, and governments are conscious of media perception, right? Public perception. And what was a non-issue 10 years ago, no one spoke about lakes and zoning and so on the way you do today. No one spoke about the environment at the pitch that you do today. And even if it's for a vote bank reason, if governments take stock of the fact that people are now going to vote for me if I have better roads, if I have cleaner lakes, at least in an urban setting, you do it. So one is that change is driven that way. The other is lawyers enable it through court. And you'll be amazed how much of that has happened through court orders. People blame our Supreme Court for being too activist, for deciding which fuel you should use. They say you don't have the expertise. That's a point well taken. But if the executive is not doing something, or doing anything in some cases, then the courts have to step in. And I believe that progression is where the lawyers facilitate that change. Yeah. Look, it's not an absolute thing, Ashwini. I mean, you also have to see to what extent this honesty is even required. In a situation that you're saying, if your senior is on his legs somewhere else, to me it doesn't matter. The fact is your senior is not available to argue. And you can stop short by saying that your senior is on his legs in another court and request for a pass-over or an adjournment. And if you're not getting it, then you must be honest enough to say, I have not got the adjournment, let me argue the case. And your senior won't fault you for it. So honesty is not self-destruct. You don't have to volunteer information that is in a sense extraneous. I mean, if you tell a High Court judge, my senior is in the district court, I know that some judges take it amiss. But my point is you don't even need to say it. So in that sense, I'm not speaking about an absolutist concept here where you're a scapegoat. You don't have to be. Your honesty requires you in a situation like this. In fact, you have to be honest with your senior. Sir, our passover kododilla. So I will try and get a passover. If he doesn't give me or she doesn't give me a passover, I will have to argue it. That is your honesty in that situation. And then you have to honestly be prepared to argue the case and take it on the chin as well. So please don't take it as an absolute principle where, I mean, you're being honest for the sake of being honest. I don't mean, because our honesty, Ashwini, is not so much a moral aspect as it is a professional aspect. And as you know, our professional ethics are many times at loggerheads with societal morality. Where do we stand on that? We stand with the professional requirements at the cost of being unpopular. But that's what professional honesty is. You may be representing the scum of society. People may judge you. In some cases, lawyers are assaulted in court. In the Kathua case, curiously, the complainant's lawyers were assaulted. That's where we've come. But that is the test, not an absolute thing, as you said, yeah. All the time, and let me assure you, friend, you will deal with it more and more as you get on in the bar. Because as you get more senior, The easy cases won't come your way because nobody wants to engage a senior and pay a fat fee for a straightforward case. They might as well do it with a junior, right? So the cases that come to you are progressively more difficult. When I say difficult, not just legally difficult, ethically difficult. And you know where that cutoff is. I'm not saying do everything. If your ethics come in the way and you're not comfortable, don't do it. But once you're clear that you've crossed over, then you shouldn't be losing sleep on it. Otherwise, you're extremely dishonest. You're not doing the job for yourself. You have no satisfaction. Your mom's not happy, clearly. And your client is in trouble. In fact, you will be extremely dishonest to your client who comes to you for a fee and then you sell him up the alley saying, my lord, mujhe pata hai, he has done this. Please convict him. Is that what a client has come to you for God's sake? Then don't take the brief. If you have such moral pangs that you can't deal with it, then don't take the brief, or I would perhaps say don't be a litigating lawyer. Because this you have to be able to digest. You are not morally vindicating or convicting someone. That is not your job, that's the court's job. And what you call a technical reason, in many times it's not technical, it's way beyond that. I'll give you instances in TADA cases where sessions courts have convicted people and sentenced them to death on the basis of police confessions, which you know is not worth the paper it's written on. You are an absolutely honest lawyer to go in the appellate court and say, here is a confession that's not admissible, and get an acquittal. Now, yes, you're talking about slightly gray areas where you know perhaps something's been done, but are you the judge? You're not. And you are providing a defense within the law. You're arguing on procedure. You're arguing on merits. You're talking about credibility of witnesses in a criminal case. You're talking about proportionality of sentence. Okay, I know my client has committed corporate crime. He's a one-off offender. The law may say he should be sentenced from anywhere between 1 year to life, and the court gives him life. Are you not entitled then to argue, say it's disproportionate? Are you not entitled to say reduce life to the minimum? Are you not entitled to argue for probation? And this is the thin line, the nuance that we walk. And all of that makes us more honest, in my opinion. And people will never realize this till their clients themselves. You just stay at it, actually. I mean, I don't think I had a mantra. I wish I had taken to yoga and stuff, which I did not. But I think you brainstorm, you talk to people who are on your page. We went a lot. My juniors will tell you we're a complete riot sometimes, but that helps you, you know. It helps you get a lot of the poison out of your system. I certainly think for not just lawyers, but for any individual dealing with sharp emotional stress, you need sounding boards. It's bad form to think you can deal with everything on your own, because you can't. You sometimes just need to hear yourself speak, you need to get stuff out, you need perspective. And I think that for me was a good coping mechanism. Talking to friends, talking to juniors, talking to colleagues in the bar who are on the same page, not necessarily talking to your mom or dad. That's a dicey place to be in. But I think a lot of that helps, because it helps you bounce stuff off. It gets the load off you. And then when you keep going back and doing it over and over again, it actually energizes you. So what stressed you out earlier begins to become a kind of a positive feel for you. But I mean, all of this is frankly easier said than done. It takes a lot of time. I think it takes a toll on your health. It takes a toll on your mental state, on your relationships. But I think things equalize over time. Yeah. That's a good question. But you know, when you talk about things like successful, etc., those are also relative terms. People have paid a huge price. And I think people need not be shy to speak about doing the right thing. The success is in doing the right thing, in my opinion. And if people talk about it more and more, that is the success. Your reputation is the success. Your accolades and medals may or may not be there, but you will be judged on that. The first thing is, on the private side, your client cares for the case more than you do. If you have a case, God forbid, involving your property or your family, you will follow it to the hilt. That doesn't happen with the government. Governments don't care about litigation. right? Because a case is only as good as the officer you are interfacing with. And added to that, I will say it's tough because court perception is generally anti-government. You know, courts by and large don't favor the government. I think every lawyer with all these problems should get some experience with the government, and that is that you deal with very, very non-linear situations, and secondly, you deal with new branches of law which you may not have earlier. So I think for me the challenge now is perhaps to be slightly a better professional if I can try and apply some of these learnings, not just legal learnings, but I think personal learnings in terms of interacting with people, with officers, and to see how that goes. Yeah.